Hi there and welcome back to the channel. I'm the GCSE science teacher and in today's video we'll be learning about surface area to volume ratio for GCSE biology. I hope you find this helpful. If you do, feel free to comment, like and subscribe and let's get into it. So why does this actually matter? Well, first of all life on Earth really depends on this structural idea of surface area to volume ratio, but also as a teacher I've noticed a lot of students find this concept quite tricky, specifically because they mistake surface area and volume as the same thing. But it's important that we learn the difference today and we actually understand the maths needed specifically for science at GCSE because around 10% of the exam will utilize some math in some way, regardless of the type of exam board you're studying or the level of which you're studying at. And it's worth knowing how to apply this maths to different situations. So, first of all, then, let's define the difference between surface area and volume. So, surface area is the total area of the surface of a three-dimensional shape, and the volume takes into account the space that the object actually uses up. So, the length multiplied by the height and the width. So, in this case, we have a regular cube with 5 centimeters as its length. We can work out the volume simply by doing 5 times 5 times 5, the length times the height times the width, and this gives us an answer of 125 centimeters cubed. However, if we want to work out the surface area, we get a slightly different answer because we have to consider the area of one side, or one face even. So we would do 5 times 5, the length times the height, get an answer of 25 centimeters squared. Slightly different unit here. You can see what's being taken into account. And because it's the surface area, well, we're looking at the entire surface, right? So we have to times it by 6. There are 6 sides to a cube. So 5, the 5 times 5 is the area, that's the 25. 25 times 6, which is the number of sides, gives us 150 centimeters squared. And because we're looking at the ratio or the relation between the surface area and the volume, well, we have to put the number is it in order. So we have the surface area, which is 150, to the volume, which is 125. And we can simplify this ratio, and I have simplified it for us. So we get an answer of 6 to 5 as the surface area to volume ratio. So they're very similar in this case. The surface area is very similar in the volume as well. But this can be much different if it's a 1 to 20 volume ratio, or a 100 to 5 surface area to volume ratio. It can actually alter how an organism utilizes their structures or develops through time to actually become more efficient. And we're going to talk about that now. So, this particular topic, surface area to volume ratio, directly links to transport in cells or diffusion specifically. So, if you do want a bit of a recap, I'll go through diffusion now, but I also have a video on my channel where I talk about it in more depth. So, I'll link it in the cards above. So, diffusion is the net movement of substances from a high to low concentration. And these substances will move through a partially permeable membrane and down a concentration gradient. The partially permeable membrane, we're talking about the cell membrane. So, factors that can actually affect how quickly this happens, or at which the rate of this happens, is the difference in the concentration. So, from one side of the membrane to the other, if there's a high concentration gradient, those substances will move more quickly. The surface area, like I mentioned, the surface area is vitally important. If you have a large surface area, that means more diffusion can take place. And also, the temperature can affect how quickly diffusion happens. Because if you increase the temperature, you give the particles or the substance slightly more energy. This increases the kinetic energy. Those particles can move more freely. But also, the permeability of the membrane can actually be affected if you increase the temperature, because the membrane itself is made up of lipids and proteins which can slightly the structure of them can slightly be altered if you increase the temperature, and that can affect permeability as well. But that's kind of going into A level, and we want to just make sure that we're going into GCSE at this stage. But multi and singular cellular organisms are important for us to link this concept to, specifically how they respond to their adaptation. So, a single celled organism, they have a high surface area to volume ratio, which allows them to rely on simple diffusion. They can swim around or move around in the environment. And because they don't take up much space in the environment, their volume is low, but their surface area is comparatively larger, they can just absorb nutrients and minerals and oxygen through the environment. However, we as multicellular organisms, we can't do that. We can't just sit around and absorb oxygen through our skin. And that's because the diffusion pathway is too large. If we were to do that, we would not be able to breathe. So that's why over time there's been an evolutionary trait that's actually been beneficial to us by developing structures in the human body to help us with gas exchange or to help us with absorbing nutrients and minerals from food in the digestive system, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to survive the way we do. So, some examples then of how multicellular organisms actually absorb some of the minerals or oxygen molecules or release CO2 and do this effectively, how quickly that exchange of substances can take place is because the structures in a multicellular organism have a large surface area. They've adapted to ensure that there is a large surface area. They also have thin membranes for a shorter diffusion pathway, and specifically in animals, there is a large blood supply which maintains that concentration gradient. Remember, the blood supply is constantly circulating around the body, and that allows substances to be carried away from the area of exchange. But also substances to be delivered to the area of exchange. And that means that the concentration gradient is constantly maintained. But obviously, this is not the same in plants and they don't utilize a blood supply. So just be careful when answering questions about plants in this regard. So, some of the examples the GCSE exam boards like you to know about are the small intestine to start off with. So, I will do a whole video on the small intestine, but just for your own understanding, the small intestine is a great example because it has a large surface area. The lots of folds that you see in the small intestine are called villi and microvilli. That rapidly increases the surface area, so diffusion can happen more quickly, or glucose can be uptaken and put into the bloodstream and carried away. So that's the second point, is that the small intestine has lots of blood supply. So the capillaries that are near the small intestine can take that glucose away. They also have thin cell membranes to ensure the diffusion pathway is maintained as well. So it's much smaller. Another example that you need to know at GCSE is the lungs, specifically the alveoli, which are these sacs that you find in the lungs. And they kind of allow a similar idea that the villi do in the small intestine. They increase the surface area, they allow oxygen to be taken in. When we breathe in, we take up that oxygen and it's carried away by the red blood cells because of the hemoglobin. But the red blood cells will actually release and swap out or exchange carbon dioxide for that oxygen molecule. They'll release CO2, and that's what we exhale. They also have thin cell membranes, again, to make sure the diffusion pathway is short. And again, they are connected to blood vessels because, as we've learned today, the blood vessels maintain that concentration gradient. There's a definite theme going on here, I will say. And another example, just so we're 100% sure, you can actually see the same things happen in fish. So, fish have gills, they don't have the same respiratory system that we do. They utilize gills to actually breathe underwater. And they do that because the surface area has been increased by this structure called the lamellae. They have thin cell membranes as well to ensure that the diffusion pathway is short. And they again are connected to blood vessels to ensure the gradient has been maintained. So there's a definite theme you can see running through here. And an example in plants, remember, it's going to be a slightly different answer you would give because there's no blood supply here. Instead, the plants are adapted in their roots and their leaves because they have specialized cell structures. So you can see in the roots, they will have lots of root hair cells, which have a large surface area. They also have leaves that increase the surface area as well. So the surface area structures in a leaf we're talking about are the stomata that can act as a pore and opening for gas exchange to occur. So the bigger the leaf, the more stomata there are, and the more gas exchange can occur. Also, they have thin cell membranes and cell walls to ensure there is a short diffusion pathway. So again, they utilize the same ideas. I do hope that video helped you. If it did, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And do share this with someone you think would also find it beneficial. If you want more GCSE content, check out my channel for other videos, but also check out my Instagram and TikTok at the GCSE Science Teacher for more help with biology, chemistry, and physics. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you soon. I've been the GCSE Science Teacher, and you have been curious. Bye.